my name is Freya and I am the Communications and Engagement Lead at the IMB staff group. It's really nice to see people here today to learn more about the Independent Monitoring Boards, or IMBs. We're also joined on the call today by Jo Dawes. She's an IMB member of our Birmingham board, Hannah Pittaway, who is the Policy Manager at the IMB staff group, and we also have Rachel, our Communications Manager, and Arabella on the call, who's our Head of Policy and Impact. They will be on hand in the chat if you had any questions you wanted to add there. Just a reminder that this session today is being recorded, and if I could ask you to keep yourselves on mute unless you're asking a question, that would be really helpful. So what will we cover today? I will be giving you an introduction to the IMB, who we are, who we work with, and what we do. Jo will be talking a bit about member experience. Hannah will be covering some of our policy work, and then I will be giving you an update on our media impact and our new recruitment campaign. We'll also then be opening it up for a Q&A. When we get to that portion of the event, please feel free to pop your hands up, real or virtual, or put your question in the chat and we can pick it up. So who are the IMB? At this point, it might be worth noting that the IMB staff group also support lay observers. Lay observers monitor the welfare and access to justice of people who are brought into courts and held in court custody. For the interest of time, we're not going to cover them in today's session, but if you did want to find out more about lay observers, you can visit their website, layobservers.org. So I will just show you a short animation. This is used in our recruitment campaigns, and it outlines the roles of IMBs for those of you who don't know what IMBs are.
Inside every prison, immigration removal centre and short-term holding facility, there is a vital task being carried out: the independent monitoring of the conditions and treatment of those being detained there. Appointed by ministers as the eyes and ears of the public, we are the Independent Monitoring Board, unpaid members of the public doing an extraordinary role. We report on whether the individuals held out of sight in these places are being treated fairly and humanely, and whether prisoners are being given the support they need to turn their lives around. This can make a huge difference to their lives. Whether you're looking to develop your skill set and gain experience, reconnect with the working world after taking a career break, or meet new people and fill your time, we are looking for people who share our values and commitment to volunteer with us now. IMB, our eyes on the inside, a voice on the outside. Visit www.imb.org.uk to find out more.
So that was a little bit about the role of IMBs for those of you who didn't know. But how are IMBs run? So we function under two acts: the Prison Act 1952 and the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999. We also operate as part of the UK's National Preventative Mechanism, also known as NPM. We're signatories to the United Nations Optional Protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. So we are an organisation almost of two parts. We are split between IMB members. These are the unpaid public appointees, so the volunteers who go and carry out the monitoring. And then we are split between the staff group. So we're a very small staff group, and we are paid, although we are employed by the Ministry of Justice. We also operate independently. To give you an idea of how many members we currently have, it's sitting about 1,030. So leadership. Our national chair is Elizabeth Davies. She operates alongside our management board. So management board are made up of IMB members who each take a specialism within the management board. So they provide leadership for IMBs and set strategy in the context of IMB independence and statutory obligations. You can also visit our business plan online if you'd like to find out more at imb.org.uk. This has been designed to develop and provide support for structures to help enable IMBs to carry out all their statutory functions. Alongside the management board, we also have regional representatives. They are also made up of IMB members, and they provide support for boards in their regions and are a key link in with the management board and our chair. They help ensure that the needs and views of the regions are integral to the development of national strategies, policies, and plans. So what do IMBs do? I won't go into a great amount of detail here because Jo will be giving us an outline from her perspective from a member. But generally, IMB members monitor the treatment received by those detained in prisons, immigration removal centres, and short-term holding facilities. They report on whether it's fair, just, and humane. You may be aware IMB members will publish an annual report for the establishment they monitor. If you wanted to read any of these, they are published on our website. They observe compliance with relevant rules and standards of decency. Boards also have unrestricted access to every part of their establishment, prisoners and those held in immigration detention. IMB members will hold keys, so they do freely roam the prison, and the only records they don't have access to are medical records. So who do we work with? IMBs and monitors, their role is to report on what they see on a day-to-day basis. Their role is not to inspect. We have agreements with following organisations: the MOJ, HMPPS, the Home Office, including Border Force and other scrutiny bodies such as HMI Prisons and the PPO. So I will now pass over to Jo, who will give a little bit about what it's like being a member and her first-hand experience. Thank you, Jo.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you this afternoon. So the first question I'm always asked is, why did I decide to become an IMB member? I'm currently final year now, in fact, of my psychology degree, with a passion for mental health and supporting those that are considered the most vulnerable in society. I also have a natural interest in the prison system, and therefore this opportunity enabled me to link the two passions, mental health and the prison system. There is no average day within the prison system in terms of the IMB. There are a variety of roles and responsibilities that we have, and I'm just going to share with you a few of them. As Freya mentioned in the earlier slides, we are observing and monitoring the fair and humane detention of prisoners. And that's ensuring things like the regime are offered and that prisoners' welfare is everybody's priority. In addition to monitoring and observing the day-to-day running of the prison, we will also attend the good reviews to ensure that they're conducted fairly. We will also be dealing with applications from prisoners who may have a cause for complaint or they're unhappy with a decision that's been made. And it's important to remember that in each of these roles that we hold, we're not there to make decisions or to manage or to reprimand. We are there to ensure that the prison policies and procedures are adhered to and that everybody is working towards the same outcomes. Now, that sounds heavily weighted towards the prisoner, but we understand the need to support prison staff too. And so when prison staff are working with us, they may share the challenges that they're experiencing, enabling them to do their job. And that could be short staff, it could be lack of training, it could be lack of equipment. And so our duty is to observe and understand those limitations that may be experienced. And we would also include that within our regular monitoring reports. And you may ask yourself, well, what difference does that actually make? You see everything, but you can't actually do anything about it. Well, actually, I'd argue the opposite. Our monitoring reports are submitted to the governor each week. And in that, we'll be very objective about what we've seen and what we've discussed. And of course, the decision and the change remains with the governors within the system. But also on a micro level, the engagement that the IMB will have with the prisoners is the ability to support them in the process of obtaining lost property or accessing the healthcare provision. It's also about making ourselves available for them just to talk to us. It's not a therapeutic session, not at all. But often a lot of the issues that prisoners will raise often come from long periods of isolation. And so tying in with my view of good mental health should be available to all. I might find myself on a monitoring day on a wing listening to a prisoner who may be frustrated by the regime, but actually accepts that that's how it is and just wanted somebody to talk to. And so the role of the IMB is to support the prison officers as much as it is the prisoners, because together they are what create the safe environment in which the prison operates. I think it would also nice just to share one experience I've had personally at Birmingham. For those of you that are familiar with the internal mechanisms of prisons, occasionally they will change prison wings. And there was an issue one day that was happening on a weekend. Prisoners weren't being given their regime, they weren't receiving their food. And the IMB were present that day. In fact, I was present that day, and I was able to have a direct conversation with the governor, and we were able to restore order and justice. And it meant that the day was less pressurised, there were less incidents of violence. And I think everybody on that day felt better as a result of communicating and working effectively together. So my role at the IMB has been incredibly rewarding. It's a unique opportunity, as Freya mentioned earlier. We have unrestricted access to everywhere within the prison, and we can speak to anyone. It does exclude medical records unless we receive explicit consent from the prisoner, and it's in direct relation to a matter that we're working with them on. And that, for me, in line with my degree and my personal passions, has increase my level of empathy and understanding that the prison service is currently facing. So if you are interested today and you think that this role might be something you would like to do, or in fact you see yourself doing, I would urge you to begin the application process, because that's what I did 18 months ago, and I'm just so glad that I was given that opportunity. Thanks, Freya.
Thanks, Jo. I'm now going to pass over to Hannah, our Policy and Impact Manager. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Freya. Afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about our policy and impact work. So we're a small policy team in the IMB staff group made up of me and two policy leads, one focusing on prisons and YOIs and one focusing on our work in the immigration detention estate. Our role, in simple terms, is to make sure the concerns that Jo and her colleagues in local IMBs have nationally in our prisons is relayed to those who can make the change. So we do this by taking all the findings that Jo and other members report through their monitoring and analyse those to identify themes, issues, concerns, and then raise those in a way which will hopefully influence policy and practice to have better outcomes for prisoners and detainees. So there are various ways that we do this, which are here on the slide, and I'll talk through briefly. So firstly, we analyse IMB's findings to build a national picture. We recently established a new process where IMBs report more regularly to the staff group. So rather than waiting for each annual report, which is a statutory obligation for each board, each quarter all IMBs report on the top issues and concerns that they currently have. And this basically gives the policy team a database of live issues across the estate, which we analyse so we have an up-to-date understanding of the national picture and know where to put our focus in terms of making change. We've recently started publishing national thematic reports on select issues, and I'll talk about these in more detail next, but we use the IMB's findings and quarterly reports to decide what topics to focus on. So we're always addressing local IMB's main areas of concern. We also support IMBs and the National Chair to escalate issues. So Joe and IMBs have statutory powers to report any serious concerns they have directly to the Minister. In some instances, the staff group will support IMBs with escalating those issues and track any responses that they receive. In some cases, our National Chair will also raise issues on behalf of local IMBs. So you may be aware that our National Chair, Elizabeth Davies, has recently raised concerns on behalf of all 4 YOIs in England, the chairs of the IMBs and YOIs in England, regarding the lack of regime and safety in YOIs. Responding to consultations and meeting with policy leads and officials. So as on an earlier slide, we are operationally independent from the MOJ and HMPPS, but we do work closely and collaboratively with them to make sure that IMB's findings are being fed into the development of policy frameworks. So we respond to a lot of consultations, and we also meet regularly with policy leads and officials to raise any emerging concerns and best practice that IMBs are finding on the ground. We submit local IMBs findings to Select Committee inquiries, and we work closely with the Justice Select Committee and other committees to report on key issues that IMBs see across the estate and inform committees' views of the national picture in prisons. Our National Chair also gives oral evidence to inquiries when invited, and most recently our previous Chair, Dame Anne Owers, gave oral evidence as part of the committee's inquiry into prison workforce and staffing. We also have close working relationships with other scrutiny bodies, particularly HMI Prisons and the PPO, as Freya has already mentioned. So IMBs regularly feed in their monitoring findings to inspectors to inform an inspection. And if IMBs have concerns outside of the inspection cycle, they'll also escalate these to HMIP. And in some instances, that's meant that an early inspection has been triggered. Our National Chair also regularly meets with the Chief Inspector of Prisons and the PPO, and our policy team also meets with the respective policy teams to share areas of concern and best practice. We also work closely with other monitoring and inspection bodies, as we are a member of the NPM, as Freya had mentioned earlier on. Thanks, Freya. So recent thematic work. I mentioned earlier that we've recently started a programme of thematic reports based on the key concerns of local IMBs. So 3 of our most recent thematic reports have focused on IPP prisoners, concerns regarding the mental health of women in prison and the use of prison as a place of safety for women, and also the poor conditions for children and young adults in the 4 YOIs across England. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the process of one of these thematics, so the IPP thematic report. So in May this year, we published this report on the impact of the government's decision to reject a resentencing exercise for prisoners serving IPP sentences, as was recommended by the Justice Select Committee following their inquiry. This was the first publication to focus on the impact of the sentencing rejection and what that had meant for IPP prisoners. So the policy team worked really closely with 24 IMBs to put this together. The report was based on real-time observations of the impact that the decision was having on prisoners' well-being and the impact of the sentence itself, as well as any case studies. So in the briefing, we reported that there had been 3 apparently self-inflicted deaths, which had happened in the 4 weeks since the government's decision was announced. IPP prisoners who spoke to IMBs across the prison estate had described increased feelings of hopelessness and frustration, and that their mental health was suffering. Many IPP prisoners were questioning whether they would ever be released and were fearful that they would die in prison. Progression pathways were poor and unclear, with many being held in inappropriate prisons where they couldn't access courses they would need for parole or release. And there was also inadequate preparation for release. So there were issues with things such as securing accommodation, which IMBs felt could lead to recall. So the briefing that we published had various levels of impact. So at the government level, the briefing was sent to the Prisons Minister and also senior HMPPS officials. As a response, our national chair was invited and now sits on the IPP External Challenge Stakeholder Group, which has oversight of the revised IPP action plan that HMPPS have produced and will continue to feed in local IMB's findings into policy frameworks and other work that's being developed as part of the action plan. In Parliament, Sir Bob Neal, who's the chair of the Justice Select Committee, referred to our findings in the House of Commons in a debate where he was again pushing for a resentencing exercise to take place. And Lord David Blunkett, who was Home Secretary at the time IPP sentences were brought in, also referred to the report in Parliament. In regards to other scrutiny bodies, you may be aware that the PPO have recently published a learning lessons bulletin regarding IPP prisoners, and this was taken forward after we'd published our briefing with the finding on the 3 apparent self-inflicted deaths and raised our concerns to the PPO. In regards to the sector and other criminal justice charities, we had a positive response to this from the sector. So we had various comment pieces and supporting statements by organisations such as UNGRIP, which is a campaign group for all those affected by IPP sentences, Prison Reform Trust, NACRO and Inquest. And it also had a positive impact for those people who have been impacted by IPP sentences. So we were made aware of positive comments of people who had previously served IPP sentences that were being made online. And Inside Time also published a piece on this in the national newspaper for prisoners. So outcomes for IPP prisoners continues to be a key area of focus for IMBs, and our work on this issue will be ongoing and will hopefully continue to have impact in this area. Thanks, Freya. I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. So Hannah's spoken a bit about the impact we had across government and across the sector, but our thematics have also been picked up in the media recently. So Women's Hour, our previous chair, Dame Anne Owers, featured on there, Radio Times and Channel 4 News. I have added the links to the coverage on the presentation, so I will circulate that after the session in case anyone wants to go back and rewatch. So how can you get involved? So unfortunately, HMPPS staff and MOJ staff are excluded from becoming members, as this could be considered a conflict of interest. However, what you could do is please spread the word among family and friends about the IMB, raise awareness of our role, and please let anyone know who might be interested in becoming a member, and that we currently have a national recruitment campaign open. This will be running till the 29th of October, and you can find more information about applications online at imb.org.uk. We also run virtual information evenings if you're interested in hearing a bit more about our members, or you have anyone who might be interested in becoming a member, please advise them to sign up because they're really informative and engaging events. Again, all the information on how you can sign up can be found on our website. We'll now open up for a Q&A. We've got about 20 minutes, so if you'd like to pop your hands up or put your real hand up or pop your question in the chat, we can pick it up from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My camera's off, but my name's Rachel Guyford. There is a question in the chat function, Freya, for Joe, so I'm going to read it out. Joe, how do you report your findings at a local level and how are these responded to? Do you generally get good buy-in from local management or do you have to work hard to make your voice heard?
Okay, thank you. So the day-to-day monitoring when we're observing within a prison, all of our observations are included in a weekly monitoring report. And it's a very objective report. There's no emotions in that. It's what we've seen and the impact of that. And that's then sent and shared to the number one governor, who will look at that and take that information, and where he can, I'm sure he or she will make the changes that are necessary. In terms of buying from local management, yes, because the IMB has worked incredibly hard to make it clear that we're not inspectorates, we're not managing, and we're not there to consistently report failings. What we are there to do is to support both sides of the establishment, the prisoner and the prison officers. And so when there is an issue, and it's an issue that can be resolved, it's about working really hard to show that we're identifying an issue that the resolution of which will benefit both sides of the coin, if you will. And when you use that that skill set rather than the inspectorate approach, you will find that staff from prison officer level right the way through the governor levels are open to listening, because everybody wants better outcomes, because better outcomes within a prison create a safe and stable regime, which means that more people can get into education, into workshops, they can get out for their activity sessions. And so the IMB is that set of eyes on a situation that is afforded the freedom to think more creatively about how outcomes could be achieved. And it isn't uncommon that, for example, if one department isn't communicating with the other due to low staffing levels, perhaps, I might find myself running over to healthcare saying, look, we've had an application, or this issue is here. What do you know? What can we do? And I'll run back to the wing, and then you find that issue has been resolved. And that goes a long way to saying, look, we're here to monitor, to observe, and we can monitor both positive and negative situations. But I think we're all on the same side. And my experience at Birmingham with the current governor has been a really positive experience. In fact, he actively encourages the IMB dialogue. And I don't think that that's unique to Birmingham. Back to you, Freya.
Thanks, Jo. I wonder if we didn't have any more questions, whether it might be useful just to give a quick outline of the applications process for the people on the call, just so they know what the process is for members. Sorry, that was a question to you, Jo.
Sorry, I wasn't sure. Right, okay. So you want me to talk about the application process. So first of all, you've got to have a passion and a want, and there can't be a conflict of interest, which Freya has quite rightly pointed out. And so the way I applied was one New Year's Eve night. That tells you a lot about me. I was Googling about how I could make a difference in the criminal justice system, and there it was, the IMB. First thing I did was familiarise myself with all the policies and the procedures and the annual report for the board I was interested in. I really needed to understand the challenges that that particular establishment was facing. The recruitment event told me where there were spaces on the recruitment board, and thankfully Birmingham was looking for board members, and at that point I registered my interest, and there's an application form that you have to fill in. Now, it's looking more for character more than qualification. So if you're an individual that isn't judgmental, isn't there for any other purpose than to make things better, then this is the job for you. And the way I filled in my application form was to look at what the IMB was after and look at my skills and attributes that matched. I was then invited, rather excitingly, to a tour of HMP Birmingham, and I didn't need to be asked twice. And I was taken around by a board member. We had a good look at all of the areas of interest. And at that point, if we were still happy to, the choice will always remain with the candidate. We were then invited to an interview, and my goodness, was it an interview. And again, it's not about qualifications, it's about, are you the right person to serve in that environment on that particular board. That interview was conducted online, so for those of you that might find time
Oh, have we lost Joe?
I think so, Freya, yeah.
Okay, no problem. Is there any more questions, Hannah, that you'd like to bring in from the chat or the floor?
Nothing else in the chat and nobody with their hand up that I can see.
Okay, no problem. I suggest we'll then move on to our final slide. So for more information, you can visit our website. We have all the materials mentioned above, so you can access the annual reports, more information about being a member, or any of our MOUs or agreements with the previous organisations we've mentioned. If you did want to keep up to date with the work of IMBs, you can follow our socials. So we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you did think of any more questions that didn't come to you right now, you can email us at imb@justice.gov.uk. And a gentle reminder about our recruitment campaign. So if you do know anyone who's interested, it is running until the 29th of October. So please pass on the information to anyone you think might be interested. But it's been great to see you today, and thank you so much for joining us and learning a bit more about the IMB. And thank you.